As part of our pre-election coverage, we turn to another candidate making a first run for Boston City Councilor at large. He grew up in Mattapan and Dorchester with later experience in workforce development and youth programs, and most recently as a vaccination volunteer. We'd like to welcome Nick Vance. Thank you very much for being with us, Nick.
Hello, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Nick, I want to talk to you about the most recent part there, that you've been out working as a vaccination volunteer with an agency based in Roxbury. What have you been doing there exactly?
Yes, so my campaign and I have been working with Age Strong in Central Boston Elder Services to ensure that all the communities of Boston were going to be able to have direct access to the vaccine. As you remember in the early goings, when it was 75 plus, 66 and plus, it was still hard for people to get scheduled and getting appointments done at the Reggie Lewis Center. I'm glad to say that things have changed. I know CIC is running things over there now, but I really got deeply involved because I wanted to practice what I preach, which is, I'm really dedicated to trying to help our city recover from this pandemic so we can get out of all this pain that our communities have been going through throughout the city. So that's how I got deeply involved and engaged with getting people vaccinated. Matter of fact, people are getting vaccinated right down the street from where I'm at right now here in Roxbury. So I know that the work still continues.
What was the main barrier you had to overcome with people? Was it their trust, or was it just the difficulty of finding out how to make an appointment or get somebody on the phone?
It was definitely about getting appointments. So we're talking about it. There really needed to be a grassroots effort from the beginning. And it was really just blasted out there. Hey, you can get vaccinated now at the Reggie Lewis Center. But I feel like people shouldn't have to feel like they have to fill out a dissertation in order to get a vaccine. It's just, they were way too long. There was too much information. We're asking 80-year-olds to fill out an entire worksheet of their medical history, their background, half of the people we call don't even know where their medical card is. So let alone knowing all the different numbers, who to call. So really, we wanted to bridge that gap by helping as a resource and making sure that people could get vaccinated. So we've been helping people directly fill out their applications through the Reggie Lewis Center, helping them directly through Central Boston Elder Services to really ensure that people could have that direct access. I think that's a misnomer, unfortunately. I think people really wanted to preach that, well, people are weary about the vaccine, that's why people weren't getting it, when I think it was really an access issue. And as you can see, we've done thousands of vaccinations, and we're just one small piece to a bigger puzzle of different groups. Like I know Diane Wilkerson and others have done the Black COVID Coalition, and they've done an amazing job as well of making sure that people have been vaccinated in and around the communities, and particularly communities of color, because that is the highest number of infected groups is people of color. So really making sure that we focus not only at the city at wide, but also making sure that we create access for people locally. And even communities like Allston Brighton felt left behind. So really making sure we've been doing vaccinations out in Allston Brighton at elder centers as well. So, we feel really proud about the work that we're doing. And I would be doing this work whether I was a candidate or not. So that's really what drove us to it.
You have background in youth development and workforce development, and if you look at people who are trying to emerge from the pandemic, let's start with those students who've lost some ground. How would you apply your background to help them as a counselor?
Well, the first things first is I know we have this huge push about getting people back in school. And I think the first step is we really need to look at infrastructure. Our schools, we're one of the oldest school districts in the country. And our schools reflect that. When they talk about the CDC talking about ventilation, some of our schools don't even have classrooms that have heat, let alone the right ventilation system. So the first thing I would look at as a youth worker at heart is how do we ensure that the classrooms are safe, not only for the students, but for the teachers. The second thing I would do, which has finally come to fruition from a lot of us kicking and screaming, is making sure that teachers have the opportunity to get vaccinated if they want to be vaccinated. So that way we can protect our work staff. I think our youth are paying the price. I've been talking to parents throughout the city of Boston, talking about child depression, talking about anxiety because they are no longer with their friends. And I think we need to try to, one, get ourselves healthy again so we can bring our kids back to school. And I think my youth work experience would say that young people need that connectivity. They need that energy of being able to be together, whether that is in a mass setting, whether that is in a social distance setting. But we really need to make sure that we do it right and we do it safe. And I know a lot of cities and towns have rushed their schools to come back, and then they've had to shut them down because of the fact that these outbreaks occur. And we also have to remember a lot of our young people are in multi-generational homes. So making sure that we create safe environments in schools so they don't bring that back home to their grandparents or their parents. So those are some of the key things that I would be working on as a city councilor, is ensuring that there is a safe and effective way of getting our young people back to school, because there is going to be a deficit, right? There is going to be a lag, as they call it, the summer lag, right? So we're just going to have a year lag. So I think, I know there's been a lot of proposals thrown out there about whether we should increase the school year, whether we should make more programs available for after school or create longer days. I think really right now, the focus should just be, let's get back to school. Let's get people back in the classroom in a safe and effective way. And then we can talk about how can we fill those gaps of inequities that have happened over this time.
I know the city's been giving a lot of housing relief to people who are squeezed either because of the pandemic or the housing market more generally. But what about going forward? Do there need to be some additional protections, especially for renters?
Absolutely. I've been a strong proponent of we need to ensure, I just looked at the budget again this morning. We need to make sure that there's actual money put aside so that way people, one of two things has to happen. People have been racking up $1,000 worth of bills for rent because of the moratorium. And I believe the moratorium was the right thing to do. But one of two things has to happen. Either we have to ensure that there is money put aside for landlords, so that way to offset the cost of what tenants need to pay, or we need to ensure that there's direct access to relief funds for all of these renters and or home buyers that are trying to make sure that they can stay afloat. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be in a world load of pain. And I don't want to see another 2008 where the housing market crashes because people can't afford to pay back things and pay back their loans. And unfortunately, right now, that's not being talked about. Right now, we're talking about how do we increase the moratorium again. And I think that's great, but we just need to make sure that the budget really reflects the real needs of the people, which is making sure that there is direct access to funds and not these long drawn grant processes, not hoping and praying that the government, federal government stimulus will bail out Boston residents. I think we need to be really strategic and intentional about making sure that there is real access to real funds for people who don't have it. Because the other thing is a lot of people are still unemployed. So where's that money going to come from? And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of being in the city council. And that's something that I would push.
I know even before the pandemic, one problem with the housing market was that people who had decent jobs who could pay were moving in. But you're a millennial, and you see some of these millennials are going in the other direction. What do you want to do about that?
We have to make the city more affordable. That's the issue. The number one issue, and my wife and I went through this as well. I mean, and we both made pretty decent money over the years, and it's just impossible to live in this city. It's incredibly expensive. I mean, you're talking about a one-bedroom shack going for $600,000 a year. So one of the first things that I would tackle as a counselor is I know for a fact that the city right now is talking about this 2030 plan of all the money that has been saved up from all of these new construction sites who have paid they're fine, so they don't have to build as many affordable units as they're supposed to. We need to make sure that that money is allocated to creating real affordable housing, right? The affordable housing market right now is a joke. The AMI, the AMI setup doesn't make sense. You need to make almost 60 grand a year or under, but you're asking people to pay $1,400 a month, either in rent or a mortgage, which is impossible. And I always challenge people to remind themselves what it was like when they made $60,000 a year, plus having student loan debt, plus trying to pay for a car, right? So that's one of the biggest issues and why you're seeing millennial doing what I call the reverse flight. All of my friends live in Weymouth, all the way out to Plymouth, because it's just impossible to live in the city. Even my wife and I, we rent because that is the only way that you can really stay in the city of Boston. So I really would tackle our affordable housing market. How do we look at that AMI for individuals? I think we need to raise that. The Boston Globe has already said that you need to make at least 80,000 a year to live in the city. So why don't we make the AMI $80,000 a year? Why don't we're putting so much luxury housing up. Why don't we put great affordable housing up? And I tell people there's opportunity zones throughout the city of Boston that could be utilized to build an affordable housing unit. I mean, you have over 10,000 people right now waiting, trying to get on an affordable unit. And it's demoralizing for millennials. And that was one of my strongest pushbacks when I was on the mayor's millennial council back in 2016 with the mayor, was you can't say in one breath that you're trying to keep the brain power in the city of all these people graduating from college, that millennial age gap, but then all you see is luxury housing because we can't afford that. I can't afford $4,000 a month, $3,000 a month. And now you're talking about them pushing these new housing developments in Roxbury and Dorchester, and the average income in Roxbury, Dorchester is around $60,000 per a couple. So how do you think that they're going to be able to afford something like that? So San Francisco has done it. Many other places have done it, where we create real affordable housing, apartment complexes, condos that are really just for affordable units. And I don't mean Section 8, right? People think that that means that you get a cheap, rundown place. I'm talking about really nice facilities, but is directly 100% created for affordable units.
Sounds like the start of a plan. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Nick Vance, candidate for Boston City Councilor at Large. We'll have more news in just a moment.